He's dead, all right. No kidding. He's so cold. Is the pizza?
Welcome to the Final Girls podcast, where we like our slumber parties with a side of murder. I'm Anna Bogutska, co-founder of the Final Girls Collective and your podcast host. If you are new to the show, welcome. In real life, the Final Girls put on events and screenings that explore the intersections of horror film and feminism. And on the show, we take a horror trope, think and talk about it in depth over the whole series. Which basically means that I invite very smart, very funny women and non-binary folk to talk about horror movies in depth with me. And in this fourth series of the podcast, we're looking at teen horror, how it's evolved, and why teenagers, and especially teenage girls, make some amazing and compelling protagonists. Before we dive into our double bill this week, a quick reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Final Girls UK for updates, event announcements, special invitations, tons of horror-y TikToks, and we also have a Patreon where you can support our work if you so choose to and get occasional bonus episodes. We also have an editorial platform where we commission new essays by amazing writers with new stuff coming out every week. So I encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter to be the first one to receive all these straight in your inbox. With all of that said, today's episode, we're very much still in the 80s slasher heyday with the first two entries into a unique franchise, the Slumberparty Massacre. The premise of all the films is pretty simple. A group of girls have a slumber party and a killer tries to murder them all with a massive drill. Not overcompensating for anything at all. The interesting thing is that it remains the only slasher franchise written and directed entirely by women, and there's also a reboot coming out later this year. So the entire franchise is kind of filled with feminist intentions. Whether they succeed or not, we shall see in this episode. If you're new to the show and have never seen these films before, like I said, the plot is pretty simple, so there's not much to spoil, but we do go into detailed conversations about both the films pretty much from the beginning. Much like our discussion about Prom Night last week, there is also extensive chat about the dance sequences in Slumberparty Massacre Part 2. It's like I'm obsessed with dance horror or something. Joining me in this episode is the wonderful podcaster and Freudian cinephile Mary Wild, who joins me to go deep and not so deep on the Slumberparty double bill. And with all of that said, please enjoy our take on the Slumberparty Massacre Parts 1 and 2. Mary, thank you so much for coming back into the podcast and for picking this particular double bill.
Oh, hi, Anna. It's a pleasure to be back. I'm so excited to be talking about the Slumberparty Massacre 1 and 2.
I think it's very telling that we've left off 3 because it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Yes.
Yeah. The less said about it, the better.
Exactly. Yes, it exists. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
But before we kind of dive into what Slumberparty Massacre... the first one and the second one are, and ripping them apart a little bit. Can you tell me why you picked these? Like, what do these films mean to you?
Oh, wow. Well, when I saw your list, first of all, I was really impressed with the selection that you had going on. And I would have happily done every single one of them with you. But I decided on these two in the first instance because there's something really subversive about them that I'm really kind of intrigued by, and it produces a really strong feeling in me when I watch them. I do really love these movies, truly. And I've never really had an opportunity to discuss them before. So I thought, well, this is great. I can't wait to talk about it with you.
Amazing. So I want to dive into all that love and all that subversion that you see in these films. But to set the scene, how would you summarize the Slumberparty Massacre?
Well, in a nutshell, it's a film that follows a high school senior who gathers her friends around for a slumber party. and they're all unaware that an escaped power drill wielding killer is loose in the neighborhood. And it's, I guess you could say that it does follow certain tropes. I mean, in my understanding, the original creators of this movie were setting out to almost do a parody of the slasher.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's sort of diverted away from that plan. And am I right in thinking that the studio ended up telling them to shoot a straight movie?
You are. So
yeah.
It was written by Rita Mae Brown, who's kind of a feminist writer, as a parody, as a satire of slasher films and the sexist tropes that she saw in them. And then when it was produced by Roger Corman and his company, and it kind of became a straight slasher, so a more direct entry into the slashers that were kind of really exploding all over the place after the really big, genre defining films that had come out in the mid and late 70s. The 80s were very much, franchise the shit out of everything.
Yeah.
and do as many of these as possible. So it was kind of aiming for that. But I think, and we can discuss this later, a lot of the humor still is alive in the film. And although the credit in the film is given only to Rita Mae Brown, Amy Holden Jones, who's the director, she's written, I think I found a blog post that she wrote a while ago when I first found out about this film, that she very heavily rewrote the script, but is not credited as a writer on it.
Oh, interesting.
But yes, that is the premise, basically.
Yeah. I mean, watching it, you can kind of tell that there was always the kind of like origins of tongue-in-cheek absolutely throughout it, and it just runs through. But it is this strange interaction between the desire to do a parody and the insistence on doing it straight that ends up producing this kind of final result that is weirdly like alluring, but for very taboo reasons. And I think that's why I like it so much.
Okay, well, go into the taboo reasons. Don't tease me with taboos and then don't explain what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, firstly, the opening scene, of this young, this 18-year-old girl waking up. Right away, we see like her morning routine. I mean, listen, I'm like pretty. I watch wholesome content, Anna. I watch YouTube videos of influencers doing their morning routine. Not once have I seen anyone look so. So sexy in the morning.
It basically starts off as a softcore porn, doesn't it? Where
totally.
It's like, I'm gonna admire. It's like she grew breasts overnight, and she's like, "Oh, hello! I must now throw away all my toys and put on a sexy dress because I have now overnight become a woman."
Yeah, I've completely just blossomed within like a day, and I'm just collecting all my old kid stuff and getting ready to be, this kind of sensual adult woman. It's a very funny opening scene. And I have to admit, I watched it with my husband. I mean, I'd seen it before, but I rewatched it. He'd never seen it before. And when he saw that opening scene, he's like, what is this podcast you're going on? I'm like, what's going on? My husband is a Catholic man. He's like the original trad Cath, So he's a little bit, he's blushing a little bit. And I thought it was so sweet. But no, I think just that really sets the tone, I think, for the film, because I think that in that scene, the crux of the movie is already there. This kind of rejection or turning away from childhood and kind of having this newfound embracing of all the things that await you in adulthood and womanhood. And I think it just picks up from there.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because one of the things, and I wanted to ask you about what you think makes this film subversive, like you mentioned before. One of the things that the setup is fairly simplistic, but then a lot of what the girls do is kind of all the telltale signs in slasher rules that will get them murdered. You know, they're only talking about boys. They're like hanging out. They're smoking weed. They're talking about sex. They're sexually active. Like, all of them are kind of marked for death. Yeah. But that's not exactly how the film plays out.
No, exactly. I think the taboo or subversive element that I identify in it really is it's kind of embodied in the weapon of choice, the power drill. And it, you don't have to be a Freudian to make the link between this murderer's weapon and the phallic element and, the drilling. And it's there's so many great scenes of like, the tool like pushing into walls and through like doors and stuff. By the way, I had completely forgotten about that whole peephole business. At the beginning. That was hilarious. But I think what makes it so kind of a little bit risky, a bit daring, subversive to me is I enjoy this movie purely on the basis that I'm reading it entirely as the young female protagonist's desire, for having sex. Of course there's a history and there's a tradition in slashers where it's very like male oriented and like it's all about what the male predator or perpetrator wants to do to the women. And it's very exploitative. And there's something to be said about that too. Mm-hmm. But I think here, so much, like practically every frame is so like, just like completely coded in this kind of intimate bond between women, whether it's showing them showering together and there's something very sensual, very like almost romantic going on. Even when we have like the character of Valerie, she's a bit of an outcast, but Trish wants to kind of include her in the friend group. And I think I feel like even just that is quite romantic. There's something quite sweet and like there's this, I don't know if it's a solidarity between sisters or something a little bit more like maybe bi-curious going on there. But whatever it is, it's for me, it sets up already this like little subtext of unrequited love and longing for someone and feeling like you can't have that person. So it's like star-crossed lovers, situation where Valerie has to stay home with her little sister. She's only across the street, but she can't go to this party. And because it's so, I feel like even though, yes, of course, in the end, the studio demanded a straight slasher, I actually think the female voice has prevailed here. I think that,
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. And I never thought about it as like star-crossed lovers, and I love that interpretation of it. I do. I mean, I know, and it's kind of been on the record and a while back because we screened the Slumberparty Massacre 1 and 2 at the BFI a few years ago. And let me tell you, screening part 2 at the National Film Theatre in London is an experience. It's a choice. It was amazing.
Amazing.
So when I was researching those films, like at that time and before this as well, like there was, I think Amy Holden-Jones's voice and her choice of framing and stuff really is evident here. Like you can really feel that this is a director who's trying to make a statement or trying to avoid certain tropes. I know that there's a couple of scenes, especially in the showers and stuff like that, with some soft nudity of the actresses that she's also talked about kind of being forced into doing by the producers to fit into what the expectations are of slasher films or what they were at that time. Yeah. So she very much resented them. And I think she's even said, and you can tell in the film, they're kind of less artful than other scenes because she's just like, okay, well, you want tits? Well, here's some tits. You want some ass? Well, here's some ass. Like, I'm just going to do a straight image, like straight shot of some butt cheeks. Like, there you go.
On a platter.
Yeah. It's like, okay, I'm done here. I don't want to do this. But you're forcing me to. Fine. Here you go. Some butt cheeks.
Interesting.
Then we move on. And I really feel that because even when I first saw the film, those scenes kind of really stood out as being off tonally with the rest of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing that you mentioned about kind of the solidarity between women, there's a little bit of bullying going on. There's a little bit of kind of girl gang tension, which is always interesting to see. And these sort of two groups, right? Because there's the group of friends, of girlfriends, and then there's Valerie and her sister Courtney, who are across the street but kind of isolated and kind of hanging out by themselves, and the other group of girls, and then eventually they get together and they defeat this killer. They have to bond together for a shared purpose and protect each other.
They work together. Yeah,
which is kind of as well the kind of I think the quietly subversive thing from this film is that there's not ever just one protagonist. It's all about the group of young women, of girls, as opposed to just a single one that's the one that we should care about. They all have personalities, and none of them kind of fit into, this is the mean one, this is the slutty one, this is the wholesome one. They're all kind of a bit of everything.
Yeah, you're right. They're quite well-rounded characters, aren't they?
And I wonder if you notice as well with Valerie and Courtney, who are, when they're hanging out, they're kind of talking about boys, and they're leafing through magazines. looking at burly naked men. Good for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was hilarious. I mean, I have a little sister, so it just kind of harked me back to living at home with my family when I was younger, and like how we used to bicker, but how we used to tease each other. She'd read my diary. I love that girly stuff being represented on screen, and I just love the way it's shot, and the whole business of like braiding your sister's hair, doing her makeup, and she wants to be just like you, and there's this kind of little bit of rivalry, but it's all very like, ultimately you have each other's backs, and I think that I like your statement about how the film doesn't try and isolate the experience of any just one girl. It's like a lot of what we're seeing can be seen as a kind of collective working together, that any one of us, thinking back to when we were teenagers, we can relate to pretty much all the women in the film. And I like that inclusivity of it. I like how the girls are so comfortable with each other, and they joke around. There's not this kind of self-conscious feeling about how they appear in their bodies. And to be honest, I felt a bit of FOMO. I wish I was there with them hanging out, like it just, it looked fun. I like the way that the movie makes the slumber party experience look so inviting and fun, and like something carefree that is not meant to be serious. And you're doing everything except sleeping, this is your little enclave as a young woman experimenting and wanting to like have a little bit of a secret and gossip with your gal pals. And this is your time to do it. The parents are away. You have a limited amount of time, and you kind of you gotta live in the moment.
And I love as well that there's no love interest in here. The only sort of teenage boys that we get are literally horn dogs. Like, they're basically just doing anything to just leer at the girls. They peep at them, but it kind of reminded me in a way of Anna Biller's The Love Witch, where the male characters are all so underwritten on purpose, to make them like caricatures. And it kind of feels the same here, where it's like, no, these guys are just, there's no personality to them. They're just there. They just want to see some tits, and they're behaving like literally unhinged little puppies.
I love that line.
And I kind of love that, because usually we always get in slasher films, like, there's one love interest, there's the boy who's slightly different, he's a pick-me boy, and then he either ends up dying or saving the final girl. And here we get none of that. It's all about the girls. Nobody else matters. Not the parents, not the boys. It really centers them in every single way.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. I love that you stated that they're underwritten on purpose, and you really feel that watching the movie. they are just an afterthought. It's really about the dominance of female subjectivity at that particular age. I mean, actually, I even thought, rewatching it again, that the next door neighbor, the male guardian, as it were, who's kind of instructed by Trisha's parents to kind of look after her and be the watchful eye and make sure she doesn't get into any trouble. I love how that was a misdirection, because I had, when I first saw that movie, I thought that he might have been potentially the killer, or that he was going to try and like sexually assault the girls or something like that. And I love that misdirection, that actually it's just this little hint that he might pose a threat, or that, because you can see that Trish is really annoyed by him. But actually, in the end, he's irrelevant. He's completely irrelevant. And I think that works very much in your theory that this is about, this is like a psychologically female space. And the men are just passing through, maybe like fleetingly. They're just tourists.
Yes, I love that. Tourists. Except one man.
Yes, except one man.
There's only one man that matters in this film.
Oh my gosh. I have some thoughts about him.
Tell me what you think about the driller killer.
Well, the driller killer, in my mind, I have this association with him, and I don't know whether it's right or wrong. I've not read enough about these films to know whether it's a prevalent feeling, but Anna, he really reminds me of Bob from Twin Peaks.
Yes, he does! Yes, he does,
right?
Mary! Thank you!
Oh my God. Like, same creepy, crazed look in his eyes. Almost like the same outfit, like double denim, you know?
Yes. Double denim all the way with a red shirt.
Right. And just this kind of like maniacal look. Hardly any lines at all, he's more like almost this nightmarish entity and this allegory or metaphor because of the way he acts rather than an actual person, and that, I have to say, to me, that's very effective at a horror level. And I just can't help but find him really scary and unsettling because he's not written and acted and performed in such a way that you can imagine a real life person with like a character development behave. So you can't predict what he's going to do. You just know that he's just a murdering lunatic with one aim, and that's to just like pierce through people with his power drill. Like that's literally his whole aim. And that's why I keep thinking that the choice of weapon, the drilling in and out, I guess I just feel like he's more of a fantasy, like a taboo fantasy of young women who are experimenting and like discovering themselves sexually. I mean, we know that one of the girls in the friend group, she is already sexually active. And this becomes like a kind of, I guess like a topic of a little bit of like gentle ridicule, like the girl's listening in on her phone call with her boyfriend. That's such a funny moment when she says, "Am I getting better?"
Yeah. Bless her.
Bless her. Honestly, so sweet. And they all kind of like, take the mickey and stuff. But I guess what I'm saying is that to me, this killer, the driller killer, it's like he's just this abstract, the fearful element of sexuality that for whatever reason, whether it's the fear of the physical pain of having, heterosexual intercourse with a man, or whether it's like the indoctrination of women in a patriarchal society where there's so much like sexism and double standards around female desire, that women are, really groomed actually to feel ashamed of wanting to have sex. So there's a lot of different like factors working together that contribute to the idea and the concept of sexual intercourse as being something terrifying, actually scary, like that could harm you. And I feel like I really just read this film as a metaphor for that. And I feel like his constant, like lurking around, peeping through the window, stalking these girls. He's never far from them, i.e., the sex is never far from their mind, but it's particularly the scary element of sex that they're preoccupied with.
I see. I love, like, I think it works on several levels.
Yes, it does.
And I love that reading of it, because I'm like thinking of scenes as you were speaking, and he's both he's a very simplistic idea of sexual threat and sexual violence, as opposed to, I don't take it as like I don't really read him as a metaphor for sex in general, but I do for sexual violence in this kind of shamey way where, and it's a conversation we're having a lot right now in the culture, in the discourse, that why is it women's responsibility to protect themselves from sexual violence, like that threat always hanging over our heads every day, and when things happen, that essentially the victims being blamed for it, instead of acknowledging that there is a culture that creates immunity for sexual assault. And I'm thinking of him as like this constant threat that makes it, in the safe space that they're created, the slumber party where they're talking about stuff, and they're changing clothes. Like, none of it is sexual.
No, it's not.
But when he, for lack of a better word, like penetrates that safe space, it's this constant over the top, like aggressive threat of this stranger danger sex offender who's gonna literally drill a hole through your skull or your belly. Obviously that's a metaphor for penetration, but it's all about assault as opposed to sex to me. And kind of in their free spirited kind of lovely space where they're just hanging out and smoking weed and eating pizza, then that thread that's outside of them, that they're not inviting, that they're not, they're not sexualizing themselves, they're not doing anything wrong at all, but they're being pursued and chased by this threat. And I think this is us reading into the film because it's interesting. It's being informed by conversations that are maybe more current, but I do read it since I rewatched it this morning of like, oh, it's looming over them, but they're not really doing anything to entice it. They're not doing anything to invite it in, but they have to fight it off, and it kills some of them in the process. Yeah. And of course, this is like a lighthearted 80s slasher movie, but I do think that it's interesting kind of thinking about it as an uninvited sexual threat, but that's also a little bit like a caricature as opposed to dangerous, because he is a caricature of a villain. He's a caricature of a killer. He's got a big drill. He looks like a discount Bob from Twin Peaks. There's not much character development there. He's never going to be like one of the iconic slasher killers that we know and love. But I wonder if that also feeds into this reading of it's just this caricature of dangerous men that you should fear, when actually it's usually the boys in your school, your neighbors, like people who are close or people who are supposed to be fountains of security or sources of security and protection. And obviously here I'm thinking about, people in positions of power, or specifically like men in positions of power that then assault and sometimes murder women. But I'm taking it to a dark place when thinking about this film. But something you said really made me think of that as it's like he is kind of roaming around their house and trying to get in and trying to kill them, but there's no argument for it. There's no reason.
No, not at all. There's no methodology or motive. He just purely is driven by that impulse. And it's very reductive, but which kind of situates him outside of like the rational, the typical kind of character you see in a movie that you would want to identify with. He becomes very saturated with just that one impulse. Yeah. Actually, while you were talking, I suddenly had another association, because if you recall at the beginning of this film, he kills the telephone maintenance lady.
Yes, he does.
And
Who's also wearing double denim.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved her look, actually.
She looked great.
she looked fantastic. But it is a very interesting signifier that he chose to kill her first in the film, or at least at the start of this film.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that signifies that, because he does that in 2 instances. He kills the telephone lady first and then steals her van. And then later on, he cuts the cord of the phone where the girls are trying to call the police because they know there's some disturbance outside. So this is a repeated pattern, which makes my ears kind of prick up a little bit and think, there's something there about him wanting to curtail the capacity to communicate. So there's something there in him that wants to halt the process of kind of like linking together through the device of the telephone, which is for talking and sharing and connecting outside of yourself. And that I think plays really well into your theory about the sexual assault dimension of kind of like shaming women into the abuse that they've had to suffer. But also within that is a whole network of dominance and bullying victims where they're actually silenced. And so they're completely cut off and isolated from communicating their experience in a culture that blames them for the abuse they've suffered. So I think that the kind of cutting off of the telephone kind of activates that a little bit.
I love how deep and how dark we've gone
on
this film.
I know, right?
Which like has so many funny moments too. I don't want anyone like listening to this who perhaps has not seen this film or hasn't seen it in a while. Like, I think those are great readings. But can we talk about the humor as well?
Yes, I'm dying to. The first one for me, by the way, being the one that completely had me roaring, like almost rolling on the floor laughing, is when the pizza delivery guy.
Oh my God. I love that moment. And honestly, same. I would not let good pizza go back.
No.
Absolutely not. Like, fine, whatever, dead body, sure. But pizza? Like, excuse me. If it's Napoli Gang truffle pizza, I don't care.
Exactly. I love her whole approach as well. I love that character. She is so cool. And she's just like, you know what? I'm fucking hungry. Like, I'm just going to grab this pizza right now out of pry it out of his cold dead hands, literally, Fucking amazing.
And also the way that the pizza delivery guy is murdered. I mean, he's kind of already dead, but I found it very funny.
It's hilarious. Like he got the Oedipus treatment, didn't he? He had his 2 eyeballs like drilled out of his skull. And then he just falls to the ground. I mean, it's just, there's something there to me that really, because it is just the setup of it as well, because they're like, they're just like waiting to open the door. They're counting their like little dollar bills. It's so innocent and wholesome. And then the guy just falls down, and it's I do really like those little gags in the film.
Hey, you know what? Free pizza though. They don't have to pay for it, didn't they?
Even better. Tastes even better when it's free, baby.
Of course it does.
I love it.
Yeah, I did. I found it very funny. Not as funny as the second one.
Oh,
which we should get into.
Let's get into it.
But yeah, before we get into Slumberparty Massacre Part 2, is there anything you wanted to mention about the first one that we didn't cover?
I guess what I really want to emphasize actually segues into the second one is, the character of Courtney, actually.
Yes.
And what I really want to say about her is that she is, throughout the film, you can see that she really wants to be a part of this older crew, including her sister. She's kind of in a rush to grow up, isn't she?
Yeah.
And which is totally normal, I think, at that age. And she's so curious, but she's also super, she's got this kind of real sassy energy about her as well. and which makes her very like, outgoing, and she wants to, she's like the part of the film that drives it the most for me.
Mm-hmm.
I identified most with her because I want to know, I want to see, I want to like peer, kind of like pull back the curtain and see what's going on. These other people are doing something, and I'm so curious about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of, it, as an audience, it's very inviting to relate to Courtney. And I think that there's something really interesting that shifts from that, that kind of like get up and go that she had, that sassiness, that fierceness, which I think actually dulls down in the second one because she's experienced trauma. Mm-hmm. She's seen too much. She's been hiding under that couch and actually bearing witness to the driller killer committing atrocities. Mm-hmm. And she almost lost her sister as a result. So I think that we can really see that shift taking place where like that little spark is a little bit dulled. Mm-hmm. And now we have a much more cautious character, I would say, in the second one.
Yes, we do.
Now it's time for the fun part.
I love to jam it to the floor, let me twice pipes roar. Well, I'm an inch off the ground, the speakers all around, baby. Baby, do you like my sound?
Let's get into talking about the second one right away, because I do find it interesting that they take the character of Courtney as the only connective tissue between these two films.
Yeah.
And this one does become a lot more overtly psychosexual.
Yeah.
Because it literally is the driller killer who they murder at the end of the first one comes back, but he is literally in Courtney's dreams.
Yes, he is. It's very supernatural, isn't it? It's like, it's, for a long time we're like, okay, is he just a figment of our imagination? Is there really someone there stalking them? And being in that, I guess, mindset in the movie and that feeling that misdirection is oddly satisfying, the not knowing. And I like the fact that he's also represented as a kind of like greaser rock star.
Listen, we need to talk about this.
Let's do it.
Okay.
What did you think of him?
I can't get over him. So in the first one, he's played by Michael Villela. Mm-hmm. And he really takes it seriously. Like, you can tell this man is like gone method. He's done his research. He's like, the denim represents something. What, we don't know, but like there's things there. He's taking it very, very seriously. And this one, I think he's like Danny Zuko with a drill.
Oh my god, yes, Anna.
He is like, I've got tassels, I'm here to dance, I am auditioning for Broadway, but like a spooky Broadway, and like his driller is now a guitar with a drill at the top. And he's like, I am a rock star, I'm sort of like a disco Freddy Krueger.
Oh my god.
I will penetrate your dreams, baby, with my jams. That's his whole vibe.
Oh my god, Anna, you queen.
Like, I can't get enough of him because he's not scary, he's just ridiculous and kind of like, what? He's like a greaser serial killer. I was like,
yeah, like a camp, you know, guy looking in the window. I mean, I might just invite him over to have a dance off. I don't know whether it's, listen, he's not scary.
This one was dance horror. This one was like a dance horror musical. Because his main scene where he basically just dances for a full 2 minutes.
Oh yeah.
While like showing off his how he can not play his drill guitar because he doesn't play it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, exactly. Like, it is such a bizarre, completely absurd representation of a villain.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how they arrived at this concept. It's certainly not scary, but it is intriguing.
There's something you said at the beginning of our chat, though, that I think really applies for this one, where you were mentioning that, like, you thought that the Slumberparty Massacre first film was all about the girl's nascent sexual desire.
Yeah.
And I think that's very applicable to this film.
Yeah.
Because he literally gets into her dreams, and Courtney in this film is kind of debating as well whether to have sex or not, like whether to date this guy. She likes this boy, blah blah blah. And so it's like, it is those fantasies, those first sexual fantasies that come with a lot of, I guess, wrapped up in trauma and guilt. Not that film is that deep, but there is also the fact that he has gone from double denim to double leather.
Yeah, he's a leather daddy.
He is, with tassels. He's wearing little leather dancing shoes. He's got greased up hair. He's got a what do you call it? A bouffant? What is it? He looks like Danny Zuko. He really
totally. Does. Oh, 100%. They must have deliberately connected that, of really kind of almost like perverting the Danny character into this weird mutant, like serial killing driller killer, who's also very camp and wants to have a sing and dance with you, like, I don't know. It's just, I think, definitely in this second installment of this series, this is when the conflicted feelings toward sexuality really come to the center. And for sure, it's like really predicated on Courtney and how we can see she's very tempted by this young man. She dreams about him. And she, she's in this band and she seems to be singing to him. It's all very quaint and romantic. I really liked the scene when he kind of pulled her aside right at the beginning. And she's like, sort of like leaning back against a tree. And he says, he's trying to invite her to do something at the weekend. And she says, well, I was going to invite you someplace. And then he just looks directly at her and he says, well, invite away then. I was like, ooh, I'm getting a little hot under the collar here, like, he seems much more experienced and he seems to know much more what he wants. He's very direct. And I like that he doesn't play games, I like his style. And it seems to be, I think and I say this with the utmost affection for both of them. I don't think either of them have any bad intent, but I think he's trying to corrupt Courtney in the best possible way. I think he's trying to, like, sort of like gently direct her towards her own desire and what she wants to do. But she is, yes, of course, recovering from a trauma. And I think maybe what's gone on for her psychologically, again, this is all speculation and just pure interpretation, but I think Courtney has internalized the shame from the first film of wanting to be a part of the big girls club, wanting to, just her curiosity about men and her, just like those like budding feelings in puberty and all that sexuality that is like, still underdeveloped and she's underaged, but it's starting to like, starting to burgeon a little bit. I think what's happened to her is that she's completely associated those early impulses with what she witnessed. Those two things have become completely fused and coalesced together.
Totally. I think you're absolutely right.
And that's what prohibits her really from like fully surrendering to this experience of like a teenage romance now in the present time, in this film, in the second part. She feels the guilt and the shame that has fused those things together. And she's scared to go back into that space because she thinks it's full of danger.
And it is.
Oh, totally it is. Yeah.
It is, because the new driller killer seems to be able to kind of exit her dreams and actually kill some people.
Yes.
Which is never really explained, is it?
No, it's conveniently left out.
Yeah. It's sort of like, you know what? Just go with it. We're not going to put as much thought into this as Wes Craven did into Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, exactly. It's all meant to be this absurdist fantasy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. But it is fun. Like, I think
it's fun.
With all of its psychosexual elements, which I do think are interesting and kind of on the nose in some ways, it's actually, both of these films are really fun. The second one is just absurd, and that's why it's very entertaining. Plus, there's like several musical interludes in the film.
Oh my! I was just gonna say, and I swear to God, the bit where they start, it's just the girls. They've just arrived at this house, and they're drinking, alcohol. They've got some great snacks, I have to say. They got corn dogs, And then a song comes on the radio, and they blast it up, and their dance, and the way that they're like spraying each other with champagne, and then throwing the feathers from the pillows. Oh my God. I mean, the FOMO was like raging at that point, Anna. Like, I wanted to be there.
I mean, at that point, I was like, yeah, sure, this is exactly what goes on at every single girl's slumber party. Exactly what happens.
Oh, 100%. It's just the script that we follow. We agree to the scripts at our weekly meetings, and then we just carry on. The funny part was when the two, again, we have the repetition of the two sort of like lurking guys in the window.
Yeah.
Like literally just copy and paste from the first one. But the lines were hilarious in this one, because one of them said, "I can't believe that girls really do this at slumber parties." And the other one's like, "That's because we are dead and we're in heaven."
Unhinged puppies again.
I swear, I had to like pause just to finish laughing and then carry on.
I did a video essay about the second film for our video, which I think is on their streaming service now.
Amazing.
And I remember just rewinding the dance sequence with the driller killer, and it lasts a full 3 minutes, Mary. It's a full 3-minute scene. He dances with a guitar with a drill at the tip a full 3 minutes in this film.
Oh my gosh.
I love these choices.
Yes.
It's like,
what a concept. It's just bizarre.
I feel like the actor who plays the driller killer, it's another actor from the first film, also was his first role. And again, you kind of feel this sense is like, he's really going for it. Bless his heart.
Oh, definitely.
He's like, I'm gonna bring everything to this character. Like, who's the driller killer? What does he want? The driller killer wants to rock out. That's what he wants. Not even
What's his
death.
motivation?
Not even death or very tight leather trousers will stop him from rocking out.
Oh my God. It's hilarious.
It's so much fun.
It is pure joy. Like, yeah, for sure. This film is, it does not take itself too seriously. I mean, that's, it goes without saying. But it's also hilarious to me because I don't know whether they were trying to connect this rock star killer with the kind of like the old, warnings about, rock and roll corrupting young people and how it's like immoral, and that kind of satanic panic that's attached to rock stars, especially in the 80s.
Oh, this was released in 1987, so I guess kind of hair metal was at the top of its popularity, and so I guess it's like, well, don't you go near the hot boys in the leather pants. They're gonna kill you. Those Axl Roses and those Motley Crue fellas. Bad news. All of them.
Because I swear to God, all I could think of when I saw him in his pants was, do you remember in Friends when Ross wore leather pants?
Yes, I do.
And then he was at his date's house and he went to the bathroom and he couldn't get them back on, so he put the powder on.
Yep.
That's literally all I could think of.
Yep. I mean, I think, this actor probably had to, like, unless they were pleather, which are much easier
Yes.
to manage, he'd have to live in those pants. Because there's no way they're coming off without, like, at least a layer of skin. They're so tight.
They're so tight. Oh my God.
And I know we're not covering the third one, but I was wondering if you'd seen it and remember anything about it, because I have seen it.
Well, I saw it. I did
forgot
see it. Well, same. I could not for the life of me recall anything from it. I do remember seeing it though. I did actually watch it with some pals in high school. Because it was 1990, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When it released. Yeah, that's right. I remember we rented it on VHS. But even then, I mean, I was really young then, and I certainly wouldn't have been able to like critique a film in a serious way. But I do just remember thinking, "What the fuck is this shit?"
I think that's the official tagline, Mary. What the fuck is this shit? Slumberparty Massacre 3.
Yes, I can see it on the poster.
I actually looked up the poster as you were speaking, Mary, and the tagline is actually, "It's driller time, and this bit's for you."
Oh my God. What to even say to that?
It's great. It's
That's
actually better than the
hilarious.
tagline for the second one, which is, "The party begins when the lights go out," which makes no sense.
Literally zero. They did not think that one through.
But yeah, the quality
Oh
is
my God.
substantially dropped in the third one.
Yeah, what happened? I feel like it was sabotage almost, because the first two, I feel like the first two really had their own thing going on. They had their own tone and their own idiosyncrasies, And then it's like, it almost fell off a cliff or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Although they all made money. Like, it's a successful franchise. Every
It is.
single one of these films was made for essentially pennies
Mm.
and made over $1 million each one. I think even the third one, which is terrible, but the first one was a success, which is why there was sequels greenlit
That's right.
immediately. Like, it sold really well, especially overseas, and we've got a remake coming up this year,
Yeah.
which I'm kind of excited about. I can't believe it's taken this long.
I know. I can't wait to see it.
Me
I mean, honestly, chatting about this with you now actually makes me want to see the third one again. Like,
No, I'm so sorry, Mary. Don't put yourself through that.
I'm a glutton for punishment, Anna. But yeah, no, I am definitely looking forward to this remake.
Me too, and maybe we'll get to cover it on this podcast as well.
That would be great.
Yeah, but Mary, thank you so much for rewatching the Slumberparty Massacre for this podcast and all your thoughts and insight into it.
Oh, thank you. I should be thanking you because it's been such a pleasure to watch them and then talk about it with you.
And where can people find more of your work online?
You can just follow me at Psychstar, PSYCSTAR. I'm Psychstar on Twitter and Instagram.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.